Starseed Ascension welcomes guests from a variety of backgrounds to gain perspectives, experiences, and information in the paranormal, spiritual, and ET space. We are a community of spiritual explorers who seek to help raise consciousness. And now, here's your host of Starseed Ascension, Jamie Voss Love.
Hello and welcome back to Starseed Ascension. I'm your host, Jamie Voss Love, and I feel like the veil has already been thinning as we sort of go on this journey together, but in October this month, it's especially thin. So we have a perfect guest for that tonight that I'm really excited about and just aligning with the spooky fun energy and some fascinating topics that we'll get into. So tonight's special guest is a metaphysical author and dreamworker that specializes in the analysis of women's dreams to promote transformative personal growth and enlightenment. Founder of Dream Enlightenment podcast, she is an intuitive, introvert, and mystic. And after being diagnosed with 3 chronic illnesses, she had a spiritual awakening experience. So she now works with women all over the world, offering dream interpretation, transformative journeys, and enlightened guidance. And she holds a BA and MA in English Lit, certification in British Studies, is pursuing a PhD in Metaphysical Sciences, and is a member of the International Association for the Study of Dreams. So she lives at home with her husband and 2 cats, and she just released, which is very exciting, her debut fiction novel, Dream Hunters, a Metaphysical Mystery of Magick. And this is book 1 of the Witches of Maple Hollow series. So I will bring her on so she can tell us more about that. Please welcome tonight's guest, Megan Mary.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi, Megan. Such an honor to have you here tonight.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, excited to talk about your book. And we have, I will say, I'm sure you already know, dreams are like such a hot topic of interest. So there's definitely quite a few questions that have come in around that. And, just to start, just for the people that haven't met you yet, would love to hear just a little bit about your journey and your spiritual awakening experience and just kind of what led you into the work that you're doing today.
Yes. Well, I would say it really started when I was younger, of course. I think when we're children, we're closest to our extra senses, and we're just taught as an adult to start to ignore them as we get older. So when I was younger, I really felt that there was this connection to the unseen, that I was really intrigued by everything mysterious that could not be explained. And to me, there was so much more going on. I think I used to have really fascinating flying dreams and also really terrifying nightmares. And I wanted to know why they happened and where we were going when we dreamed and what was really beyond that veil. And I think I started ignoring them when I was in my 20s and as I got a little bit older. And it wasn't until I got really sick and I was diagnosed with about 3 different chronic illnesses that I realized I had to start doing some inner healing. And I reopened the doorway to my dreams. And when I did, all of this information started surging through and directives, really. And one of them was to step into this role to help other women with their dreams as the catalyst to their self-discovery.
That's beautiful. And I know you're a mystic and intuitive. Do you remember having any intuitive or mystical experiences, whether through dreams or outside of that when you were younger?
For sure, I think that there was a lot of different ones. I don't remember one in particular from my childhood, but I definitely had a sense, like I said, that there was so much more going on around us. And I was really just obsessed with Halloween ever since I was little, partly because of the veil being the thinnest. And, not so much because of horror or the gore or all that kind of stuff, but more the mysteriousness of it and the aspects that was when other worlds were closest to us and when we could really access them that much easier. And also just that observation of the turning of the wheel and the changing of the seasons and what that meant for us as humans.
Yeah, definitely. And just kind of working with women in that space and in a healing capacity as well. Do you see people that have had visits from loved ones on the other side?
Definitely. And I have myself as well. And everybody seems to agree that's had them that they are very distinctive, that they're not like other dreams. And dreams can be of large variety, right? They can be very simplistic or they can be very complex saga-like dreams. But everyone seems to agree when they've had the visitation experiences that those are the ones that this is different. Like this person just showed up and said, hey, I got to tell you something, that kind of thing. And you just really, it sticks with you and you almost have a moment of lucidity because you recognize that this isn't the usual story that I experience.
Definitely. And for those type of dreams, does it seem like it just sort of happens randomly, or can you actively work to call in?
I've been asked that, and it can, of course, happen randomly, but I think you can also manifest those dreams because dream manifestation itself is really the purposeful process of requesting guidance from your dream. And you can do this by writing down in your journal or just spending some mindful time before you go to sleep, asking for what it is that you want guidance from. Because dreams, I feel, and the reason I call myself a mystic is really, I feel dreams are the doorway to our subconscious, but they're also the doorway to the spirit realms and to the other planes. And we can access knowledge from our universal self through our dreams. So you can manifest dream solutions, and you can also manifest dream scenarios. And if you're seeking guidance from one of your lost loved ones, you can definitely ask for them to appear in your dream.
I love that. And is that one of the ways that dreams can be used to sort of develop and enhance intuition?
Yes, absolutely. So the key is really being able to decode what the message is of the dream, because the dreams are very often, most times, not literal. They're symbolic stories. And they're comprised of all of your subconscious. So you really want to be able to mine your subconscious and create a lexicon of your own symbolism so that you can understand what it means for you, because the meaning is unique for every dreamer.
Yeah, that makes sense. And are there common types of dreams that you
There are. I mean, I think that what makes dreams thematic dream parallels is that we all are spirits having a human experience. So we all live in planet Earth and we're having these similar experiences that might play out in our dreams, But that's where the similarity ends. And so if you sit 5 people down at the breakfast table and ask them all what their dream was, they may very well all say, well, I had a dream about that too. But then when they start talking about the details, they'll say, oh no, it wasn't there. It was this. And no, that this other person was there and this other thing happened. And you start to see that it really isn't just the I was late for work or I didn't study for my test dream, that there's other things mixed in with it that make it unique to you and thereby the meaning unique.
That's beautiful. So kind of tracking or journaling dreams and journaling what those symbols are so you can kind of notice what your own sort of dream language and symbolism is.
Yes. So it's really important to keep a dream journal for that reason, because we will forget over 50% of our dream within the first 5 minutes. And even if you're very skilled at this, which I have been doing it for many years, I fool myself every day because I'll say, oh yeah, I'm going to remember that. Or, oh yeah, I don't need to write that down. And then I'm like, oh, what was it? That was something major. Why didn't I write it down? So, I mean, because you're migrating from brainwave states, you don't have the same retention or the same cognition abilities to analyze it. So you're just in, and that's good. You're in a receiving state. You're in a less judgmental state. But when you're transitioning there, if you can harness that and record it, that's where the power lies.
Definitely. I feel like that was integrated into my dream space last night because I was talking sort of in between dream and the waking world. And I was like, I have to remember these 4 things. And I kept repeating it over and over. But I was like, oh, to get up and write this right now, you know. And you're right. You know, you think it's so profound that you're going to remember it right throughout the day. And it's very easily to
yes
out of your
it takes dedication.
I love it. So like I said, you know, there's quite a few dream questions. We'll kind of weave this into the book, so I'm excited to talk about that, but wanted to ask you about recurring dreams. And in your experience, do you feel like that these are unresolved issues, or could they sometimes be prophetic, either or how do you kind of perceive those from your experience?
Yes, they are unresolved issues, and anything that comes back over and over again is because you're not receiving the message. So your subconscious is going to try and rejigger it, reframe it into another scenario. But the beauty lies in recording the similarities and then the differences, to really start to see, okay, it was that dream again. Okay, but it wasn't the same exact dream on repeat. It was just similar. So what was different this time? So that you can start to see, okay, what am I supposed to be paying attention to? What is it that I'm not getting about this message? Because when you do that integration, I call it dream integration, where you take the knowledge from the dream and you integrate it into your waking life, then it's going to change. And it may very well go away.
So once that recurring dream disappears, like you might be able to pat yourself on the back.
Yes. I mean, it's really, that's why I call dreams the ultimate self-care, because it's how we care for ourselves. It's how we pay attention to that little whisper in our subconscious that it might be ignoring. And it's trying to guide us all the time, but we're not always ready to listen to it.
Yeah, I love that. So in addition to the journaling, are there any other ways that can sort of help recall?
Yeah, so when you first wake up in the morning, don't just wake up and jump out of bed. So take a little moment, like a meditative moment, in what I call the middle world, to hang out and try to think backwards. Think, where was I just? What was I just doing? Who was I just talking to? And try to really concentrate, thinking where you just were. It's much like when you walk into a room and you say, what did I just come in here for? And you have to kind of trace back your thoughts. Oh, that's right. Okay. That's how you start to remember your dream. And you're going to remember it backwards. You're going to remember the last thing that happened first. So if you write that down at the bottom of the page, then as it starts to reveal itself backwards, then you can get that chronological record.
That makes sense. And are there multiple dreams that we're having typically that we may or may not remember?
Yeah. So in general, we have about 5 to 7 dreams per night. And if you wake up all the time like me, you remember them all. But some people think they don't. And you just either have subconsciously turned off your dream recall by saying, I don't want to hear that message. I'm not ready to receive that guidance. Or there's other things that can influence, like hormones, which is really influential when it comes to women's dreams. When our estrogen rises, our dream recall rises as well. And so as we cycle with the phases of the moon, it can affect our dream content as well as our ability to recall.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So then where would lucid dreaming fit sort of into the mix when we're aware?
Yes. So lucid dreaming is basically obtaining a state of lucidity in your dream where you can recognize that you are dreaming and affect the course of the dream. And there's a lot of applications for this in the healing realm, because if you find yourself in a nightmare, for example, but you're able to recognize that it's a dream, you can change that whole scenario. You can face whoever is chasing you. You can say, no, change the scenario, change this landscape, and you can immediately change the dream. And that can be very powerful to show your subconscious your inner power, right? And it also is very adventurous too. It can allow us to travel to places we've never been, to experience scenarios we've never seen. And it's one of the things that was most fascinating to me in the very beginning. It was the first book that I bought when I was a teenager was Lucid Dreaming, Stephen LaBerge. So, I mean, I wanted to learn it right away.
Love it. Can we, I get asked this because of flying. You mentioned flying, those fun dreams. Everybody loves to fly, right? And the feeling of, either levitating or flying. And so is there a way to sort of wake ourselves up within the dream to be able to enhance?
There is.
Lengthen that.
Yes, there is. There's multiple ways, and I teach about these in my course on my website. One of the ways is looking at your hands. So it's kind of a reality check trick. So during the day, just kind of observe, am I dreaming? Am I dreaming? And make it a habit to just kind of ask yourself throughout the day. Because when you do that, eventually you're going to go, am I dreaming? And you will be. Now, the other trick is that when you are doing those checks, to look at your hands. Because when you continually look at your hands, you're also going to do that in your dream. And so I made a habit of doing this on a regular basis. And I would look at my hands and ask myself if I was dreaming. And then one night I was dreaming and I looked down at my hands and I didn't have any rings on. And I wear a lot of rings. And I was like, oh, I did it. And I was so excited, of course. I woke up.
Oh.
So that's what happens at jams the matrix when you initially are trying to learn it. As soon as you realize you're awake, you wake up. So it does take some more advanced techniques as you go through to try and maintain that state.
Yeah, you sort of have to advance your knowledge and learning through the process. I love it. Okay, so I think you sort of answered this by having, different lexicon, but does dream analysis, does it differ across cultures, whether it's themes or symbols?
Well, definitely the practice of dream analysis does. So in Western culture, we don't really do it. We don't acknowledge that they mean anything. We're rather taught to be embarrassed about them, if anything, and we don't give them any credence. So other cultures around the world do have a bigger appreciation for them, do have it as part of their culture where they share and they exchange and they revere them as sources of valid information. So there's that aspect, but I think in general we really just need to have a greater appreciation of them. But in terms of like cultural tropes, there's your usual metaphorical similarities that happen, and I think it goes back to the culture. So I think if you're living in an Aboriginal culture, you're going to be dreaming about running out in that environment, right? You're going to be dreaming about your daily life. I recently was on a podcast with a woman who's been a radio show host her whole life. She dreams about dead air happening. And she's talked with other people who are on radio shows who say the same thing. So there's things that are common based on your life, but what's going to be different is your whole life experience and everything you've ever done and every piece of content you've ever consumed is stored somewhere in your puzzle box. And so it's going to combine those things with your everyday life and make a story. And really, what is the message of that story is what dream analysis is about.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so here's another question that comes up quite frequently with many of our viewers, which is, as you know, in the spiritual awakening journey or process, we can open up and access a lot of our Akashic memories or records. And so the question of, are dreams ever actual memories versus something that they're trying to work with?
I think on a very philosophical quantum level, yes, they can be. Because it's not just what's stored in this lifetime's subconscious. It's all lifetimes subconscious. And also parallel realities.
Yeah.
So on a quantum level, everything is happening all at the same time. We are here and there, past and future. And so, of course, we are multi-dimensional. And so when you recognize that we're not just one dimension, this body, 3D Earth, 2024, that it's way more than that, then that explains where all this content is coming from.
That's beautiful. So I imagine that there are intentional techniques that you might be able to kind of like ask yourself maybe before you go to sleep, or just kind of focusing your energy on a particular topic. Is there a way though to know for sure, or is it just a matter of trusting your intuition after you kind of have the dream and navigating?
Yeah, I think that comes down to inner knowing and cultivating that inner wisdom. Many times people that are empathic, that pick up other people's energy, many times in the beginning, they have to ask themselves, okay, is this mine? Is this me, or is this coming from someone else? It's probably similar to that process where you have to learn to differentiate, but you also have to trust your inner knowing.
Yeah. And so I imagine keeping a journal and a record of that information, you might be able to kind of like put the puzzle pieces together in that way over time.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
And have any of your past lives come up in the dream space?
Oh, for sure. I mean, and there's so many, right? Countless. I mean, so definitely that's part of my creative inspiration is my dreams. And that's where I got the idea for this book. And that's where a lot of the dreams come from, is because there's just so much to to cover, right? And there's just so much happening. And especially when you're undergoing that onion peeling of a spiritual awakening, the dreams are like epic sagas. They're so prophetic. They're so amazing.
Yeah. I love it. And definitely have one of the questions is about the prophetic dreams. But we're going to take a very short break and we'll be right back to continue our conversation.
While most near-death experiencers return to this plane of existence with alluring tales of their time spent in the presence of the divine, what happens when one crosses the veil into the afterlife, into the void? In the new book, Dying to Meet Them, Mindy Tautfest describes her journey to the afterlife after a devastating aneurysm, how a strange turn of events would lead her to spiritual growth, divine healing, UFO experiences, and a greater understanding of the universe. Get your copy of Dying to Meet Them today at Amazon.com or visit unxmedia.com for more information on this book and more amazing selections from UnX Media Publishing at unxmedia.com.
This is Margie Kay, and I'd like to say thank you to all of our KUNX show hosts, staff, listeners, and viewers for making us number one on Paranormal Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome back to Starseed Ascension. We are here tonight with Megan Mary. Welcome back, Megan.
Thank you.
All right, and we've been diving into the dream space, pretty hardcore. We have every facet of it covered by the end of this podcast.
Yes.
So thank you so much for sharing your expertise and insight. I guess with the prophetic dream, before we went to a commercial break there, it was more kind of a statement and observation, which was just to say that sometimes we may not realize that a dream is prophetic until much later, although some can be very quickly in their manifestations. And just in my personal journey, I remember writing down a dream and not realizing it until years later when I went back and revisited the book of dreams and realized that had unfolded. But interestingly, like you were saying, in the multidimensional space, there was something at the time I had the dream that, was relevant to the present situation. So it was almost like it helped in the present. It was something that spoke to an event in the future, but not knowing that until that unfolding process happens. So it can take some time.
Yes, and when we consider the quantum field, whenever I'm asked about prophetic dreams, I bring that up and I say, okay, well, first we got to destabilize your concept of reality and say that if there isn't linear time and everything is happening all at once, then you're not necessarily having a prophecy of something because it's already happened and everything is already, so it's just experiencing that interdimensionality of it all happening at once.
Yeah. And it's because it's like a past, present, and future, just all simultaneous time.
Yes, exactly.
Sometimes it's hard to wrap the
it is
around the quantum.
Yeah, it hurts the brain, but it explains it a little bit better when you learn it.
Absolutely. I love that. And there's all sorts of sort of shamanic work, it feels like, that can be done, in the space with working with other people. I find, sharing dreams, or just, walking a path that will pertain to something that the person is experiencing. If you're getting ready to do a session. So in your line of work, do you ever have a dream about somebody that you're working with prior to working with them that ends up being okay? Yeah, I didn't know if that was coming out accurately, but for instance, if I do a kind of a one-on-one session, I may walk with the person the evening before in the dream space, and I'm experiencing something that maybe has been traumatic in their field or something like that. So it's interesting how they can work in that way as well.
Yeah, and I think after you analyze the dream, the aha moments for the client can come later, and also for yourself. So after you've experienced that and you've, like you said, kind of walked with them in the shadows through their subconscious, you can start to see a little bit more upon reflection as well.
Sure. Yeah. It's definitely creates a lot of compassion, and empathy, just kind of understanding. Right. And
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then I guess the only other one and this one's quite a hot topic, as I'm sure people going through the process, well, whether they're going through an awakening process or not, can have this sleep paralysis. So you mentioned kind of nightmares and wondering, because there can be recurring nightmares, but are you considering sleep paralysis something different? Do you see that? And what do you consider sleep paralysis to be from your perspective? Because there's so many different sort of.
That question has come up a lot lately, actually. So I'm going to have to do some more work around that. I think that there is obviously a greater spiritual reason for it, just like they can explain dreams in a lab and they can say, well, on the MRI, this part of your brain's firing, and this, and they can quantify it in a physical way. They still can't explain what's really happening. And so probably in the same sense, we could say, and they do, well, this is the reason that you're paralyzed, right? And it's these chemicals and it's this part of your brain that controls your movement of your body and all this stuff. And you're hanging out in this liminal space, but clearly there's a greater reason. And I think part of that, there's even a spiritual reason to sleep itself. I think that the reason that we have to sleep as humans is because we have to return to our spirit form, that we're not supposed to be here all the time. And so we all have to sleep so that we leave our bodies and return to that spirit form so that we can come back and do our work here. And so when our body is paralyzed, it's really just allowing us to do that, even at a further hilt, right? So I think it's, in a spiritual sense, part of that whole sleep experience, because that's what has to happen for us to sleep. And just sometimes we become aware of it.
Yeah. And do you observe that, because quite a bit during sleep paralysis, people will speak to like seeing shadowy kind of figures,
Right.
entities, things of that nature. Do you perceive that to be a shadow aspect that's sort of healing or something else?
I think that is where we are starting to be in beyond the veil. And so I'm not going to say that it's necessarily good or bad. It could be both. I think that there's good and bad influence out there, right? And with dreams, most of the time, it can be, if you take the Freudian view or the Jungian view, part of ourself, aspects of ourselves, and all the people in the dream are representing aspects of ourselves. I think that that's true a lot, but I also think there's exceptions, and there's those types of dreams where you're experiencing something very profound, and it's happening on another plane, and we don't really have a scientific explanation for that as of yet. I think quantum physics really helps, but it's still on the fringe.
Makes sense. And speaking of kind of science and technology, I don't know if you saw, but that Space REM company, or REM Space, I think it's called, just had the first communication from person to person documented in the dream space, which I thought was cool, because I think that we can already do that, but maybe it's, now it's just scientifically demonstrated or proven.
Very interesting. I'll have to look into that.
Yep. Well, let's get into your new book, which
yes,
so exciting. I mean, that came out just this month, and it's already a top seller, I hear.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, let's tell us about that. Tell us of your inspiration. Tell us about the book.
Okay. So The Dream Haunters, it's really, the idea came to me in a dream, of course, 10 years ago. But at the time, it was more of almost like a children's story about a time traveling cat. And I wrote about 10,000 words and I put it down. And it wasn't until 10 years later that I started writing it again. And I was going through all of my spiritual remembering, and all of that went into the book. And it really became the story of Hannah's self-discovery. So Hannah Sky is the main character, and she's a young woman in search of meaning. She's recently lost her job. She's down on her luck. She's lost her most of her family, and she receives a cryptic letter from her eccentric aunt that she's not really in touch with, Aunt Julia. And she ends up following this because she has a recurring dream about a pumpkin patch that she doesn't know what it means. So she ends up going to Maple Hollow, which is a mysterious island of eternal autumn somewhere in New England. And she discovers the mystical Sky Manor, and in the process, her family legacy. And she interacts with the wise villagers, and she ends up having spirit guides and talking cat spirit guide. And she really has to solve the riddle of what's happened to her aunt before Halloween night. So it takes place at Mercury retrograde, as do all of the books in the series. And this is one of the only times, really, I mean, there's a few times, but it's a rare occurrence where Mercury retrograde ends on Halloween. So that's why I chose 2007 as the year that it occurs. And she has to figure it all out while the veil is thin before the end of Halloween night.
Wow. So there are a lot of parallels then between Hannah's life and yours.
Oh, absolutely. I'm the creator. Yes.
And so you mentioned that this came to you a while back. Did additional things start being created once you sat down to commit to writing it?
So much, yes. And so there's 13 dream scenes in the book, and it really flows between dreams and, let's call it, reality, but it's not really. But it flows between dreams and waking, and that's very much reflective of our existence. And some of those dreams, and you'll have to figure out which ones, are dreams that I've had. So I really just put it all into the fictional story to educate and inspire and entertain.
Oh, that's fun. And so this is a series. Did you say how many?
3.
Okay.
At the moment.
Yes. At the moment.
Yes.
And what about go ahead.
Book 2 is The Dream Mirrors, and it's coming out in May, and it's on pre-order now for all of those people who have already read book 1 and just can't wait for book 2. And I'm hoping to have book 3 out by next Halloween.
Oh, wow. So you are just moving right along in this trilogy. I love it.
Yes.
So I know Hannah is just a strong female character. What are some of her qualities and attributes that you felt are important just to kind of be an inspiration to others who are going down this journey with her?
Yes, it's really relevant to the Starseed discussion.
Okay.
Because those that find that they are starseeds really feel like the truth is hidden, and that there's some other galaxy, some other dimension, something else to our existence, but they just aren't sure what it is, but they know that they know something else and that there's more. And in addition to that, that there is a larger purpose for our existence here. And that is really Hannah's path. She's a seeker. She is drawn to mystery, and she has all of the proclivities of self-doubt that as humans we are programmed with, but she has to overcome that and overcome and embrace her inner darkness to step into her power to do what she's here to do.
I love it. So finding all sorts of gifts that she has all along the way.
Yes.
Yes. And so she's really walking that like hero's journey.
Yes. And so much of what she experiences is a process of learning to listen to your inner wisdom. And so she has the different guides along the way, but in the end, it's really her path that she has to blaze and that she has to embrace. So it's very much women's fiction in that way, and it's also a coming of age story, even though she's in her 20s, where she's trying to figure herself out.
Yeah. I love that because, even with guidance and support, and it sounds like she has support from the community or the villagers. Is that
yes.
Right? Yeah,
yes, for sure.
And, but just still kind of trusting yourself above all else and feeling into the intuition, which we can often, look outside for those answers.
Yes, for sure.
And so what about your, so it's interesting with the sort of Starseed, take on the journey and the story as well, which is extremely fascinating. What about the guide? What was your influence for having a feline guide?
That was the first dream, the talking cat. Yes. And there's other guides that will come along in the series, but for me, I have a very strong bond with cats. And so my cats are featured in the stories. as characters
Love it.
because I feel very spiritually bonded with my cats. And so they had to be part of the story, not just because black cats and that kind of thing are a trope for Halloween, but really because for her, she's always felt that connection too.
Very cool. I didn't know if it was like a lion connection or like feline beings.
Yeah, I think that for me, she's really Pleiadian, and I think eventually she may discover some of her other inheritance. But for me, I'm Pleiadian first, and then Arcturian, Andromedan, and Sirius B. So those are elements that will probably show up in the story eventually.
Wow, I love that. Well, do you want to take a moment just to share about how you sort of discovered that about yourself?
For the Pleiadian, that everyone says that basically, there is no way to know except to know. So you just know, you have that inner knowing, and that's where that connection comes from. When I was younger, I was always looking at the Seven Sisters, always saying, like, there's something to that. I don't know what it is, but there's something to that. And even though I studied English in college, when I had to take science, I took astronomy because I wanted to learn as much as I could about it. And in our final exam, we went to the auditorium, and we had to name every single constellation from heart. And I wish I'd remembered them all, but so I've always been fascinated by that. I've always really been eye on the sky, especially with the Northern Lights and comets and shooting stars and all of that. And so that obsession really is part of kind of a signature of the Starseed, right? And then as I went along in my journey and I met other channelers and healers and shamans, I got told about the other pieces, and really had those and started meeting other people that also were Arcturians and Syrians. So that's, when you follow the breadcrumbs.
That's beautiful. And I know you work with people from all over the world. Do you also work with children?
I don't actually, but I have a lot of women that ask me about their children's dreams. So I think that a lot of the techniques can be applied, particularly with the lucidity, overcoming the nightmares. Even if it's in a waking scenario, which in part of my sessions, I create meditations that are really guided visualizations of clients' dreams that they choose, and I overlay them with sound frequency to heal that story. And that is done on the waking level. And so children can benefit from that as well if they want to revisit a dream that they were troubled by and imagine, by using their visualization powers, an alternative scenario.
Oh, I love that. And it's my understanding that Hannah works with sound frequency. Is that right?
Yes, she does. Because she's a pianist. So she's always been drawn to music and, really feels spiritually entwined with it, but doesn't recognize its healing power. And it's kind of one of those light bulb moments for her when she does. So
that's beautiful. Such a powerful tool. And, asking just about the sort of the children, just because, it seems like there is a growing interest in working with, the metaphysical space, as well as the dream space, as you mentioned, that the dream techniques can be applied, to children as well. And I know your book was quite popular and the young adults, we shall say, right? Is that the correct category?
Yes.
And was that part of your intention, or did you write it to sort of everyone?
Yeah, originally it was kind of middle grade, a little bit Harry Potter-ish, and then it became, I thought, what was going to be adult, because new adult is a relatively new category and it's like college age, but new adult is more known for romance titles, and there's no romance in this book, so I knew I couldn't go in that category. And then when I started getting all the reviews coming in, a lot of people were saying, this is really more young adult. And so I thought, okay, the readers have spoken. And that just means that it appeals to all ages, that it's a cozy story in a way it almost has a Hallmark quality, but then it's a metaphysical book. So it's teaching about all these metaphysical concepts and doing it in an entertaining way. So it really appeals to adults as well as younger women and everyone in between. So
beautiful. And so as you're sort of writing like the next book, or well, both books really, are you just going with what you had in mind for your original intention versus sort of following that young adult kind of flow?
Yeah, I was asked that same question yesterday. And I think that I've found that the way my creativity manifests just comes out with that type of vibe. Let's just put it.
Yeah.
So I don't need to change anything. That's just the way I create. And it's a very, whimsical, but at the same time, this is has a lot of spooky, suspenseful elements because it's set at Halloween, but it's something that I think is just the natural way that I'm creating it. So I don't have to change anything about it. Just the way that I'm going to write it is probably going to fall where it needs to. And that's really part of the whole process of being a writer, is that you have to get out of your own way. You have to just be the channel for it and stop trying to make it into something. Just let it be the way it is. And the person that's meant to receive it is going to find it.
I love that. That reminds me of that character named Hannah. Trusting
Correct.
her intuition above all else.
That's right.
So you mentioned in the stories too, or in Dream Hunters, working with portals and ancient traditions. Are you able to share any of those ancient traditions that are outlined in the book?
Yes. So part of the underlying information in the book is about the Celtic holiday of Samhain. And so it's really observing the Celtic traditions that are the historical basis for Halloween, because a lot of people don't realize that there is any historical basis to Halloween. They think it's just a created holiday like Valentine's Day and that it's all about kids. And people just don't understand that there's actually a lot of basis to this historically in Celtic history and in paganism. And so it's really shedding a light on that and explaining the observances. And you'll see a lot of those observances in the book. And that's part of Hannah's heritage. And so she's learning about it too, but it's also celebrating that as part of the story.
I love that. And I know you mentioned at the beginning of this interview that Halloween was one of your favorite holidays. So yes. What is it that you appreciate about Halloween?
That it's really that is the turning of the wheel, the ending of the year, right? It's the Celtic New Year, essentially. And it's also the ushering in of the darker part of the year. And so it allows us to embrace our shadow and walk in the shadow. And it also allows us and invites us to cross through the veil and to recognize that we're spirits having a human existence, and that there are spirits all around us, and that we're not alone, and to really understand our universal nature and how magical and mysterious that really is.
I love that. And we have just about a minute left here. So I just want to ask you anything. Oh, Luna wanted to join our podcast.
I love that.
She feels your affinity for cats.
Yes.
But yeah, just anything that you feel called to share about your book, about your work, and how everyone can find you and purchase the book.
Absolutely. So you can find me at meganmary.com. I sell the book there, as well as it comes an audiobook narrated by Pearl Hewitt, an amazing British voice actor. It sounds fabulous, so please check that out. And on my website, I also have dream courses, and you will find also my podcast, Women's Dream Enlightenment, where I have women come on and tell their stories of spiritual awakening. And I also interpret dreams live on the show. And you can also pre-order the book. It's also available internationally at all major retailers, not just on Amazon. So all over the world, audiobook as well. Yes.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Megan, so much for joining us today, sharing a bit about your story and your amazing work and book. And thank you for all you do just in the space and for women. And thank you, everybody who is watching and listening. And until next time, may you find peace in the mysteries of the cosmos. Much love.